We are living in a modern era where the monthly hair appointment is a norm, especially with so many hair extensions to choose from. We are living in a modern era where wig lines have never been more popular and no price is too high for the right look, the right quality, and the color of the wig. From the Naomi Campbell buzz gel to the Solange knee-length braids, we have options. In our daily lives and even in celebrity pop culture, we see how the same beauty of our hairstyles can threaten the health of our hair and scalp. Most importantly, what can we learn from our ancient African ancestors as the originators of extensions and wigs? Did they do us dirty, or are we losing the plot?
On the last episode, I shared about how much our ancestors have inspired me to do natural hair care without wigs and extensions. Personally, I'm not a fan, but maybe some of you were right about loving your extensions and wigs. Let's see.
Sanibonani Ninjani, it's ancientafrica, and I'm so grateful to have you here. I'm also devastated because I was researching for this video and I found out that this picture right here that I've had on my vision board, my natural hair vision board forever, for years, is actually not their hair. So I thought these were sister locks, these were micro locks. You know, it was just inspiring me to have longer hair, like really long hair, and it just reminded me of what's possible if I could just be more consistent and just get real serious about my hair, right? But no. This is a picture of the Mbalantu people of the Wamba tribe. And these are extensions. These are hair extensions that they made out of Ifipa, also known as Sinu. The Mbalantu tribe are located in the Namibian northern border and southern Angolan tip. In terms of their ceremonies, at around age 12, ceremonies are done to promote hair development. This includes coating their hair with the thick paste of Omuchula. This is a paste that she will then use on for years and years and years. After that base is built, fruit pips and long sinew strands are tied to the hair and then styled into the Imbimvu braid. By the time she's 16, the braids would have reached the ground, and then it is around this time where she enters the Ohango initiation ceremony, which is a rite of passage into womanhood. Now, the thing is, how much of the hair is the Sanu hair extensions and how much of it is her natural hair? If you know and you're from Namibia, please comment down below because I want to know this. And from personal experience, when I keep a protective hairstyle for months, I see a lot of new growth, right? And I can't imagine the results that someone would receive in leaving a hairstyle, a protective hairstyle, for years. And also because of the new growth, I'm sure they refresh the style every 1 or 2 times a year. It definitely does make sense that they would have really long hair because you are never manipulating that hair. Like 1 or 2 times a year, if they're even taking it down, you know, which I definitely think that they are. But that's amazing. That's amazing to see the length that they retain. And I definitely think that it's fitting that they call the Mbalantu people, especially the women and young girls, as the African Rapunzels. So when you're married, the Imbimvu braid evolves into a headdress that can be so heavy that it requires support from rope or skin strap. The headpiece might change again according to other big life events such as motherhood. And now in terms of the moisture, that paste that they use. So they say that it is a blend of Omuchula, which is acacia tree bark and fat. And now when we look at the ingredients, these are supposed to be the ingredients that actually go into this. And make sure that you're subscribed because I want to definitely research more about the ingredients that our ancestors have used because that's what I want to try. I will definitely share more about that with the people that also want to try them as well. And now for the interesting part. Guys, I did not know about Sanu. So Sanu is the highest strength in animal fibers. Sanu is a broad term that includes both tendons. That is the fibrous tissue that connects muscle to bone, and the ligaments, which is the tissue that connects bone to bone. Essentially, it's the rope that ties an animal together. And then there's a process that you need to go through if you want to use sinew. So sinew is that white grayish tissue that is cut out with a sharp blade. You scrape away any meat attached, you clean it, and then you leave it to dry for a few days. When it's dry enough, the fibers separate and peel freely. That's when you pound with a hard, smooth, rounded object to separate the fibers into strands. The strands can be twisted, they can be braided and intertwined. The fiber strength has been likened to steel when it's dry, but when it gets wet again, it softens. Still in Namibia, the Himba people are semi-nomadic people who live in the deserts where water is scarce. The beautiful Himba people are a matriarchal society where the women play a significant role in the decision-making and everything that has to do with the Himba people, right? They use paste of animal fat, ground red pigmented stone, and aromatic resin of the omazumba shrub. This is what is called the otsize paste that gives that red glow to the skin and the thick coating of the hair. The Himba community, just like the Mbalantu, regard long, thick, lustrous hair as a symbol of fertility. It is an indication of a woman's ability to bear healthy children. Hairstyles reflect marital status, age, wealth, and rank within the group. The braids are lengthened by including bits of woven hair, goat hair, and artificial hair extensions. Now, in terms of the tradition behind the hair of the Himba people, it all begins from birth, where an infant or child will have their hair kept shaven, or a small crop of the hair on the crown on the top of the head, right? This is sculpted into one braid hair plait, extended to the rear of the head for young boys, and two braided hair plaits extended forward over the eyes for young girls called ozondato. The loose hanging strands are then tied backwards when the girl reaches puberty and combined with an ekori headdress made from tanned sheep or goat skin, thus denoting marriageable age. This is done through the ekori festival. Apparently, sometimes even wigs are worn over it. Women who have been married for about a year or have had a child wear an ornate headpiece called the erembe, sculpted from sheep or goat skin with many streams of braided hair, colored and shaped with the otsize paste. They will also be given a necklace that incorporates a conch shell known locally as ohumba, which is also considered a symbol of fertility. The Himba people remind me of faux locks and African threading in terms of just covering our whole strand of hair. But with them, they do it in a way that isn't drying because the technique is product based and it's health first. So it's definitely the best way to wrap your hair. And the fact that they put extensions at the end is actually really smart because it means that your ends aren't exposed and your hair is really protected from throughout the strands and then even the ends of the hair. Now, when we talk about ancient Africa, aka Alkebulan, the Egyptians were just it, And it is of no surprise that the first documented use of hair extensions took place in Egypt, of course, over 5,000 years ago. They placed and they fixed wigs. They also had sew-on hairpieces and extensions. Both men and women wore wigs. The men had shaven or straight hair underneath, and the women kept their hair long underneath their wigs. It was the rich and the royal that had the wigs, and the non-elite wore their natural hair out in public, as normal. All they had was their hair. And then some sources say that children had shaven heads with not many gender signifiers until puberty. Other sources say that boys had shaven heads and girls braided their hair or they tied it up. Other children wore one braid on one side of the head. Now, in terms of accessories, they adorned their extensions and wigs with cowrie shells, feathers, and other natural accessories. They also used handkerchiefs that were worn over the wig to protect it from dust and preserve its integrity. Now, in terms of why people actually even started wearing wigs is still a big conversation, honestly. In more recent times, people have said that it has helped them with their length retention, but I haven't seen anything in my research that talks about that. In fact, some evidence suggests that wigs were to hide the thinning of the hair, brittle hair, and bald patches in ancient times. Wigs were also a status symbol, and wigs were said to have been used for protection from the harsh sun and lice, especially because they were so large and thick. Now, in terms of the price and the material, they just go hand in hand, because in terms of the materials that were used in these wigs and extensions was human hair and sheep wool dyed. And in terms of pricing, according to an accounts list from the ancient town of Kahun, the value of hair was in the same category as gold and incense, aka impepo. There were blended wigs as well, which were a mix of human hair and vegetable fibers, but they were largely criticized by middle-class Egyptians. Some were made of sheep's wool, but the cheapest was made out of vegetable fibers. When we look at how these wigs and extensions were made, the base of the wig was a fiber netting skull cap where strands of hair were attached. A warm resin and beeswax mixture was used to attach the extensions to the natural hair that hardens when cooled. In addition to black, they wore colored extensions in bright blue, red, and gold. Queen Nefertiti popularized the trend of dark blue wigs, and we see that till this day, where there are so many colors of extensions to choose from. Whether you're choosing a wig or hair extensions, there are all kinds of colors. And back in the ancient times, these wigs were also able to be curled, braided, and styled in numerous ways. When we take a deeper look into the technique of making these wigs and using these extensions, the individual locks or braids were able to be attached directly to the natural hair in the form of extensions, just like our protective hairstyles today. Or alternatively, they could be used to create a whole wig by fastening the individual sections of hair onto a mesh-type foundation base manufactured on a head-shaped wooden mount, just like the woven hair into a lace that we see today. Although linen strings or leather straps were occasionally employed in its construction, like weave wefts, the base was most often made by fine lengths of plaited or woven hair. The separated locks could then be attached by weaving them directly into wefts of hair, which in turn formed part of the net base, or alternatively knotting them into position like a crochet hairstyle that we see today. Especially when a further method was used to attach each lock by looping its root end around a part of the net and pressing it back onto itself, securing it by winding a smaller sub-strand of hair around it and applying a further coating of beeswax and resin mixture. So what we're not going to do is leave men out of this conversation. Men were right there in wig culture, doing what it do. So elite men wore wigs above shoulder length, especially in strands, curls, or braids. Sons of elite men wore short round wigs or had shaven heads. Lesser hair or shaven hair signified subservient status. So it was symbolizing the submission to either God or master. When a priest took on a son's metaphoric role in a rite, he wore a wig with a side lock. Elite women and female servants wore their hair long because long hair was important to everyone, especially because it was closely tied to fertility. And in terms of the length of their hair, it was below the shoulders, often at breast level. Men's hairstyles reflected their position in society outside the home, and women's hairstyle reflected who they were in relation to men and in the home as daughters, as wives, and as mothers, which is very interesting. In recent years, we have seen the rise of men's bearded wigs, but it's not new. In ancient Egypt, men preferred to wear beard wigs made of human hair or wool, then grow their natural ones because of the heat. These wigs were worn by fastening hooks behind each ear, and these wigs were braided or they were knotted into a tight rectangular tube shape. In Egypt, they still valued the added masculinity that the beards gave them, so they still wore beard wigs on their chins during official or festive events. The pharaoh's beard wig was longer and thicker than the standard beard wig. Ancient Egyptian gods were portrayed with thin, long beards, so that's what the kings wore at times. Even female rulers like Pharaoh Hatshepsut had special ceremonies. There was so much power and pride that came with wearing someone else's hair, because that person sacrificed their own hair so that you could wear it. So it was almost like your own purpose was more important than theirs, in a sense, because they have submitted their hair to you. And I thought that was so interesting. And of course, ancient Egypt was the Mecca, the blueprint for so many trends that came on years later, looking at Europe, looking at America, just following the trends. And that's what we see in the 1700s, where they were just borrowing what was before. Ancient Egypt has always been such an influence to the rest of the world. In terms of the evolution and where we are now, I feel like there is no evolution, because the materials that we use as extensions are actually quite toxic for our hair. And this is what I mean. The advantages of extensions is that they are low maintenance, they're quite diverse, creative, and there are so many exciting hairstyles to choose from. They can be worn for a longer period of time, they're convenient and time-saving, they protect the hair from harsh weather conditions, they encourage less manipulation, which means less breakage, and they encourage length retention as well. But there are more disadvantages than advantages. The disadvantages of extensions is that they could be tension and breakage, scalp irritation, causes more damage to the hair that is already in poor condition, causes and worsens traction alopecia, increases chances of hair neglect. Sometimes there are harsh methods that are used when installing them. They are time consuming in terms of the installation and in the takedown, the friction and the dryness, as well as the improper removal of extensions. Outside of the traditional pros and cons, in May 2023, Lancet published this report and others followed suit. This article mentions on the inadequate regulation of substances involved in hair braiding, especially carcinogens, where synthetic extensions are a source of toxins. On top of that, synthetic extensions contain VOCs that are harmful when heated up, which is exactly what we do when we seal the ends of our braids with hot water. And then when we inhale those fumes, it exacerbates asthma. On the bright side, there are more and more hair extension manufacturers that are creating biodegradable, eco-friendly, vegan, non-toxic, and no-itch extensions. When we look at the disadvantages of wigs, it's that they increase chances of negligence of a person's natural hair. Wig caps may cause unnecessary friction and tension. Human hair wigs can also be expensive, even though they have a limited time span. It's always been said that wearing wigs was a way to look like other races other than black, but maybe it's just a stylistic choice that implies a certain status, just like it did more than 5,000 years ago. However, where do we draw the line in terms of embracing our natural hair and also choosing to wear wigs and extensions? Let me know what you think. Make sure that you like, you comment, and you subscribe. Other than that, love, light, and blessings to you. Bye.